Hello! Welcome to the first day of HTML. For those of you that hated databases, you're in luck, right? It's a new topic. For those of you that love databases, don't worry. I'm sure you're going to love this too. I feel it in my heart. All right, so let's kind of talk about where we're going here. All right, we started with databases, and databases are sort of the beating heart of any modern website. All right. The pages themselves are sort of the skin. All right. They pretty everything up. They make it look nice, but underneath it, more often than not in all cases, but more often than not, there's a database that's sort of providing the information that you actually see. And then the website is responsible for presenting it in a visually appealing fashion. All right. We don't just get like a spreadsheet with all our results. We get a nice formatted scene. So first things first, I just want to show you what HTML, which is the language we're going to use to create web pages. HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. Looks like by looking at a website. So here is Ichabod Crane's website. All right. If I right-click on this website, and I have to be careful to make sure that I'm not like on a link or something, so I'm just going to go over here to the right. And if I right-click, there's an option that says View Page Source. You can also get to that by doing Control-U. And what you're going to see is the code pop up that creates this web page that you're looking at. All right, so that's one thing that's kind of neat, is that any web page you can access, you can view the source and get an idea of how it's built and what it's made up of. Now, when you see this, you're going to see a lot of different things, and it turns out this is not all HTML. All right, this right here is something called JavaScript. All right, this down here, where was it? I saw it somewhere. Well, this right here is the HTML. So this is HTML right here. This is what's actually the code that's generating the different objects that you see on the screen. Anything that you see on the screen is created via HTML. All right, so like this LI right here is for a list item tag. This div tag divides the document up into different sections. What else is in here? Paragraph tags are for general text. So there's all sorts of code in here that allows you to create the different things that you want to see or have appear on a screen. A lot of times in here, you'll also see what are called CSS. Here it is right here. So this is CSS, which stands for Cascading Style Sheets. And this is how we format the objects that appear on the screen. So HTML is what we're going to be using to create the objects. CSS is what we're going to be using to format those objects. And then we're going to see that we can make our site more interactive through the use of JavaScript. All right, so we're going to eventually learn about all three of these. Today, we're going to focus primarily on HTML, but most websites have a combination of JavaScript, HTML, and CSS, and the pages that we learn to create aren't going to be any different. All right, we'll start with HTML, and then we'll move on to CSS, and then we'll move on to JavaScript after that, but kind of walking you through sort of the main pieces that make up most modern websites these days. And again, underneath all of this is the database. All right, the database is supplying a lot of this information that the website is then presenting in a more visually appealing manner. Okay, so we are going to be using new software for this part of our course. We're going to be using something called Notepad++. All right, so the first thing you need to do is you need to go to your bottom left corner here where the start menu is. And if you scroll down in this menu, you will hopefully see Notepad++. All right, assuming you see it there, you're going to want to click on it. If for some reason you can't find it there, we can search for it. Now, what I would recommend doing is if you don't have the search icon down here on the bar, let's add it because it's convenient to have easy access to that. So if you right click on this, you should see an option that says search. Now, right now mine is hidden, all right, which if you're not seeing like a magnifying glass or a search box, yours is probably hidden as well. So I'm going to change this to show search icon. And then that's going to pop this little magnifying glass up here down at the bottom. All right, and it's just useful to have that there for when you're looking for stuff. So if I click on this, I'm going to search for Notepad. Now, your computer's probably going to have regular Notepad, and then it's probably going to have Notepad++. All right, we're going to want to use Notepad++ because we're going to see that it has something called syntax highlighting, which is going to make our lives easier when we're creating our web pages. All right, so I'm going to click on this, and it should open up basically a big white screen. All right. Now, Notepad++ can be used for lots of different programming languages. So the first thing that we're going to do is tell it which programming language we're using. So if you go up here to language, all right, so we've got file, edit, search, view, encoding language. And then we scroll down to H. You're going to see one of the choices is HTML, and you're going to want to click on that. And then down here on the bottom, it should now say hypertext markup language file. All right, step one. Step two is that this window that's open is just a generic file. All right, we're going to want to actually create an HTML file because HTML files are what your web browser actually displays. So we're going to go to File. We're going to choose Save As. All right, now you have to pick where you want this file saved. So I'm just going to go and save this one on my desktop. So I'm going to click on this quick access button here and go to my desktop. And then I'm just going to call this one first page dot HTML. You don't have to call it first page. You can call it whatever you want, but you are going to want to have that dot HTML after that. So mine is called first page dot HTML. And I'm going to click save. And it should now say first page dot HTML up top here. Hopefully now, if you go to view and you go to view current file in, these four choices should not be grayed out. All right, if they're grayed out, it's probably because you didn't type in .html at the end of your file, which means you didn't actually create an HTML file, which means you can't actually view it in the web browser. So again, if it's grayed out, you're just going to do a file save as again, and then make sure you add .html to the end. All right. So let's talk about a web page. So HTML is made up of what are called tags. All right, and you can almost think of these tags as little boxes. So whenever we make a tag, we make a starting tag and an ending tag, and then we put things in between the starting and the ending tag. So it's like those tags almost make a little box, and then we place things inside of the box. So the very first thing that we're going to put at the top of our very first web page is a less than sign, an exclamation point, and then doc type HTML. And that's basically just letting the browser know that when it sees this file, that it's about to encounter HTML. All right, so that's sort of the default, but it's good practice to put that in there regardless. All right, now your page would work without that in there, but again, it's good practice. We're going to follow good practice, so we always start with this doc type HTML. Now, our first tag, I'm going to hit enter a couple of times, is going to be the HTML tag. So I'm going to do a less than, and then I'm going to type HTML all lowercase, and then a greater than. And what you should notice is that it turns blue. And that's what I mean by syntax highlighting. All right. When you use keywords that exist in the HTML language, this program is going to highlight them for you to designate that they are keywords. If you think back to like SQL, like select from where, those were our keywords. those would be highlighted in a program like this because they're like keywords. Then I'm going to hit enter a few times. I'm going to hit less than, then I'm going to do a slash, and then I'm going to do HTML again, and then a greater than sign. All right, and this is my first sort of starting tag and ending tag. The ending tag looks just like the starting tag, only it's got the little slash after the less than. All right, so this is my container, right? And this is the container for the entire page. All right, so this basically marks the start of my page. This marks the end of my page. All right, so everything I do from this point forward is going to go inside of this container that I just created. All right, and what you should also notice is that Notepad++ has this little red line here. It kind of shows that it's a container. If you click on that minus sign, it'll actually collapse the container. So if you ever lose all of your code, it might just be that you accidentally collapsed it. And if you click on that plus sign, it'll all come right back. Now, web pages are generally broken up into two sections. There's a head section and there's a body section. So we're going to set up both of those sections inside of our HTML tags. So I'm going to do a less than, and then I'm going to type the word head, and then I have a greater than. Then I'm going to hit enter a few times. I'm going to do another less than. I'm going to do my slash. I'm going to type in head again, and then I'm going to do my greater than. So now I have my head container, and there's certain stuff that we're going to put in here. And then let me make my body container. And there's different stuff that we're going to put inside of here. So generally, anything that you actually see on the main window of the browser is going to go inside of the body tag. All right, so the body tag is mainly for stuff that you actually see in the main window of the browser. All right, the head tag is usually for sort of the extra stuff that we need to do. All right, there might be some formatting up here. We might link in other files up here. We're going to see that we set the browser tab inside of here. So there's a whole bunch of things that we're going to do in here, but anything that actually shows up on the page does not belong in the head section. It belongs down in the body section. And you'll also notice that when you make these, each one of them also then becomes collapsible, so you can hide or shrink them as the case may be. All right? So pretty much every single page that we create will start with this same exact format. You'll have doc type HTML at the start. You'll have a starting and ending HTML tag. You'll have a starting and ending head tag. And then you'll have a starting and ending body tag. It's pretty much going to be every single page we have is going to have this same exact setup at the start. Now, before we go any further, I just want to draw notice to that I've been typing these all lowercase. They will work if I type them in all uppercase. They will work if I type them in some combination of upper and lowercase. However, the expectation and the generally accepted way of doing it is all lowercase. So in SQL, we did the keywords in all uppercase. In HTML, we do the keywords in all lowercase. So again, when you make these tags, I'm going to be expecting that you make them in all lowercase. So again, I've got a starting tag, an ending tag, and they're all lowercase. So first thing we're going to do to our page is add a title tag. All right, so the title tag belongs inside of the head section. Now, one thing that you can do to help sort of keep yourself organized when you're making pages is to indenture code. So my head section is inside of the HTML container. So I can indent this by using the tab key. And then it kind of shows that, oh, this is part of this outer group right here. And then I can do the same thing with my body tag. And now anything that I put inside of the head, I'm going to indent one step further. So I'm going to hit tab twice. And then I'm going to make a title tag. Right, and this is sort of the title of my web page. So I'm going to say my first web page. And then I'm going to close my title tag. Right, so now I've closed my title tag. Now, if I want to see what this actually did, the first thing I have to do is save my file. So you'll know whether your file is saved by whether this disk icon right here is red or blue. When it's red, it means you've made changes and you haven't saved it yet. Once you hit save, it'll turn blue, and then you know that the code that you have is the currently saved version. So if I go to View now, and I say View Current File in Chrome, it will open up my web page. Now, you might be saying to yourself, well, Mr. Bona, it's a pretty horrible web page. There's absolutely nothing on it. And I would say you're correct. But what you will notice is that up here in the tab, it says My First Web Page. All right, so that's what the title tag allows us to edit. All right, and that's also the reason that it shows up in the head section and not the body section. It's not affecting anything in the actual browser window here. It's affecting this little tab up top. So the title tag is what we use to set this little tab up top. And this first one is just going to say My First Web Page. Okay. So let's go back to our code. And we're going to go down here to our body. And we're going to start writing some code in our body. So the most basic thing that we could probably want to do is just have some text. Right? So basic text uses what's called the paragraph tag. So we start with a less than sign, lowercase p, greater than sign. That's the start of our container. And then I'm going to hit space a few times. I'm going to do less than, a slash, a p, and a greater than sign. That's the end of my container. So now anything I put between the starting tag and the ending tag will show up on my web page. So I could be like, wow, this is so cool. Right? And now that is text that will show up on my page. So if I want to see if it worked, I first have to save my changes so that it's up to date. And then I can either go View Current File in Chrome, but if I keep doing that, I'm going to end up with a ton of tabs open. You can also just refresh your page. So if you go to the page that's already open and you choose Reload, it'll change, and that will show up on the page right there. All right, so that's how I can make basic text show up on my page. Now, there's a couple of things that we need to know about text on HTML because it might not be super intuitive at the start. One is that text inside of the HTML programming language is white space insensitive. Now, what the heck does white space insensitive means? Well, here's what it means. Let's say I hit spacebar a whole bunch of times. So I space out my code like this, and I'm like, oh, that's great. Let me save that. Let me see how it looks. If I go here and I go back to my page and I refresh it, does it look any different? No, it doesn't. All right. And the reason it doesn't is because HTML is white space insensitive. All right. It will recognize the first space that you put in, but every space after that is ignored. Right? So if I want extra spaces, there's actually a special command I have to use, and it's ampersand NBSP. And that is like hitting the space bar. So each time I put in NBSP, that's like hitting the space bar one additional time. All right. So if I had a whole bunch of these right in a row, and NBSP, NBSP, so on and so forth, again and again and again and again, right, and then I refreshed my page, now you would see a whole bunch of spaces pop up. All right. So the first space works, but if you want additional spaces all in a row, you have to use that special command there. Now, white space is generally thought of as, putting spaces in, but it also applies to hitting the Enter key. All right, so if I hit this Enter key a whole bunch of times, and then I refresh my page, All right, the spaces are gone because I deleted the NBSP, but notice the enters didn't actually do anything. All right. If we want to actually hit enter, we have to put the code in for that. All right. It's not just going to work if we hit the enter key. And you might be saying to yourself, that's kind of annoying, but it actually has some benefits because when we're writing our code, we don't have to have the code go on and on and on as like one long line. Like I don't have to have this, like, let's pretend this was really long. I don't have to have it go on like this, then this, like really, really long. I can hit enter. So it's more visually easy to parse. And I know that it won't actually change what shows up on my web page. So it turns out that if I want to hit enter, I have to use what's called a BR tag, which is for a line break. All right. Now, the BR tag is a little unique in that it doesn't have an ending tag. All right. It's just less than, BR, greater than. And each one of these is like hitting the enter key once. So if I want to hit the enter key over and over again, I just have to use multiple BR tags. Right. So if I go back to this, and then I refresh my page, now you'll see that it's brought it down a few lines. So again, I just wanted to talk about that because those are two things that are not necessarily intuitive. All right. Sometimes kids will hit the space bar a whole bunch of times and they'll say, like, wait a second, why didn't that look any different? Or they'll hit the enter key a whole bunch of times. And again, they'll be like, wait, it didn't go down at all. Enter key is the BR tag, and then a blank space is the NBSP. All right. That will give you an extra blank space if that's what you're looking for when you're setting up your program. Okay. So just two things to sort of be aware of with text. Now, the P tag is the most commonly used tag for text, but there are a few other tags that we are going to use, right? And they are called the heading tags. So there are 6 heading tags. And so I'm just going to make some of them right now. All right. Now, I'm going to make my life a little easier. I'm going to copy this, and then I'm going to paste it. And then I'm going to change this to heading 2, heading 3, heading 4, heading 5, heading 6, and then H2, H3, H4, H5, H6, and then don't forget to change the closing tags as well. Right. So let's take a look at what this just did. All right, so first things first, notice that anytime you make a new tag, it does bring you down to a new line. All right, so heading 1, heading 2, heading 3, heading 4, heading 5, heading 6 aren't all on the same line. When you create that new tag, it does bring you down to a new line. Also notice that heading 1 is the largest, heading 6 is the smallest. Now, heading tags are not used just to change font size. All right, we're going to see that we have all sorts of ways to modify our pages and change colors and sizes and all sorts of different things. They're actually used in part to help search engines figure out what your page is actually about. All right, so you can almost think of it as like a note outline. All right, so like when you're taking notes in like a history class, you might have like the main topic is like the number 1, and then the subtopics you indent a little bit and make those like A, and then the subtopics of A you indent a little bit more and maybe you use like a lowercase I or a Roman numeral or something. However you do it, this is the same idea. Like if you have like a heading on your page that's like the main topic of your page, you think back to the Ichabod Crane page, like you might have the words Ichabod Crane inside of heading 1. You might have the word high school inside of heading 2. Inside of heading 3, you might have like different departments like math departments, science department, English department. Inside of heading 4, you might have things like, teachers. Inside of heading 5, you might have like individual classes, and so on and so forth. But it's a way of sort of organizing your text. And the search engines can use this to sort of figure out what your page is about. All right. It can say, like, all right, let me look to see what text has been put inside of a heading 1 tag, because that gives me a general category for this web page. Let me see what text is put inside of a heading 2 tag, and that gives me a little more information. And then a heading 3 and a heading 4 and a heading 5 and a heading 6. So it's just a way of sort of organizing some of the text in your site, to help search engines sort of figure out what your site is about. So the actual text, like the paragraphs, the sentences, those are probably going inside of p tags or paragraph tags. But when those paragraphs have headings or titles or labels, a lot of times we're putting that inside of heading tags. And it's not just that we use H1 when we want it to be big and H6 when we want it to be small, but we use this as sort of a hierarchy. Like, this is like the main thing that your page is about. And then depending on how many subtopics you have on your page, you might use H2, you might use H3, you might use H4 all the way down to H6, depending on how broken up your page is. But you may only end up using 1 or 2 of them. Now, you can have more than one H1 tag on your page. It's not like you have to use a different number each time. You can have more than one H2 tag on a single page, but it just gives sort of an organization to your page, the same way you would sort of organize notes for like a history class or something like that. All right, next, let's talk about a link. All right, so we're mostly sticking with text today. All right, we're sticking primarily with text. So let's say you want to have a link to another page on your website. So the link tag is the A tag. Okay, we're creating a hyperlink. So we need a starting and an ending tag. And I could put something in here. I could put http www.google.com. Right? And if I save this and I refresh this, it will now say google.com, but it won't actually be a link. All right, so the question is, did I screw up, or was this my teaching technique? It was my teaching technique. All right, so let's go back and see what actually has to happen inside of here to make this a functioning link. So it turns out that our tags that we've been creating, I'm just going to space these out a little bit, and because HTML is white space insensitive, this will not actually change how anything looks on my web page, because it just ignores those enters. Tags can have what are called attributes, all right? And different tags have different attributes, but one of the attributes of the A tag is called Href. So I can go inside the starting tag, because the attributes always go inside of the starting tag, not the ending tag. And I can say href equals, and then inside of quotes, I can type the web address that I want this link to go to. So maybe I want this link to go to google.com. So I say href equals, and then inside of quotes, I type out the full address. So http://www.google.com. Now, if I go back and I refresh my page, you're now going to see that it's blue and it's underlined. And when my mouse goes over it, it turns into sort of the bigger hand to show that it's a link. And if I click on this, it will bring me to google.com, just like I said it would. Now, back to this H tag here. This text, the fact that this says google.com is irrelevant, all right? Your link is going to take you to whatever you put as the href. So I could type in here Ichabod Crane, and it doesn't matter that I type Ichabod Crane, the link is going to take me to google.com. So this is the part that actually dictates where you're going to go. It's the href property of your A tag here. So if I go back and refresh my page, now it says Ichabod Crane, but if I click on it, it still brings me to google.com. All right. So you could put any site in here that you wanted, but that's how you create a link. All right, we use this A tag. The href property is http://google.com. And we have to make sure that you've got your closing tag there. Right? It's really important to put your closing tags in. That's why usually when I make a tag, I do the starting one, and then I immediately follow up with the closing one. All right, because watch what happens. Let me show you what can happen if you forget to close something. So I'm going to take this right here. I'm going to delete this, and I'm going to put this up at the top of my program. So at the top of my program, I now have an A tag. I have the href google.com. I have Ichabod Crane not dot anything, just Ichabod Crane. And then notice that I no longer have a closing tag. So if I go and reload my page, because I forgot to close it, it has now turned everything into a link because it's like, hey, he never closed that tag, so I guess he wants his whole entire web page to be one giant link. And maybe you do, but you probably don't. And that's the part where HTML can be a little tricky. If you make a mistake, your page will often still come up, and parts of it might look correct, and then other parts of it might be broken, whereas like your entire page turns into a giant link. So you do have to be careful when you're doing HTML because your mistakes won't always be obvious. In SQL, if you made a mistake, like your query just wouldn't run. In HTML, your page is still going to come up most of the time. It just might not be doing exactly what you thought it was supposed to do. And a lot of times the mistake is kids forget to close their tags, and then that creates unintended consequences later on in the page. All right, so one attribute that we can set is href. There are other attributes we can set. All right. One of the main ones that we're going to spend a lot of time with is the style attribute. So I'm going to go into this body tag here, and I'm going to type the word style. And then I'm going to type equals. And then I'm going to type some quotes. And then I'm going to say background color, with a hyphen in between background and color. Then I'm going to type a colon. And then I'm going to pick a color. So I'm going to say blue. I'm going to follow that with a semicolon, and then I'm going to close the quotes. So I've gone up into the body tag. I said style equals background color blue. And then if I save this and load my page, you're going to see that my background color is now blue. All right, so usually the question I get at this point is, all right, that was cool. What other colors can I get? What other colors besides just blue can I use? So here's the bad news. I don't actually have all of the color names memorized, but what I do have is Google. So I'm going to open a new tab, and I'm going to Google HTML color names. And what's going to pop up is a site called W3 Schools, which we're actually going to use a lot for this part of the course. And if we click on this, we're going to see that there are all sorts of different color names. Alice blue, aquamarine, azure, cornflower blue, dark goldenrod, floral white. And underneath those, you're also going to see that there are these little codes. All right, these codes are specifying how much red, how much green, and how much blue goes into making this color. All right, on a computer screen, the primary colors are basically red, green, and blue. And by combining those in different amounts, we can make any color we want. Now, I know these amounts look weird because they're like letters and numbers. The reason there are letters and numbers is because it's using something called hexadecimal. And hexadecimal is just a shorthand so that we don't have to write out like all the ones and zeros and everything else that would go into it. But if I go on one of these and I click on Color Mixer, you're going to see that I can actually kind of make any color that I want, and it will show me the code down here for it. So if I wanted this to be my background color, I could take this code right here. I could bring that over to my website. I could paste that code inside of there. And then if I refresh my page, I now get that color that I just kind of made there. So there are preset color names, but you can also specify individual codes and pretty much get any color that you want. All right. Now, background color is not the only thing that we can change, right? With this style attribute, we can actually change a whole variety of different things. And we're not going to get into all of those today. That's going to be something we explore a little later on because this is actually CSS that we're using right here. But I'm going to show you a few of them today just so we can play around with things a little bit. So I'm going to go down to heading 1 here, and I'm going to say style equals. And this time, instead of saying background color, I'm just going to change color. All right. And this is something that kids confuse a lot, but background color is when you want to set obviously the background color. Color is just for font color. All right. So maybe I want my font color to be purple. And then I'm going to hit a semicolon. And I can actually change multiple things inside of this one style attribute. So I could say color purple, and then I could also say something like font size 20 pt for 20 points. And that will set both of those properties. It will change the color to purple. It will change the font size to 20 points. And then if I hit save and I go and refresh my page, you're going to see that this went to 20 point and it changed to the color purple. All right, 20 point is smaller than I thought it was. Let's make it bigger. Let's make it 75 point. And instead of purple, which just looks like a clipped link, let's make it red. So if I go back to my page now and I refresh that, now I have a giant heading 1. So this is what I was saying before, is that we don't actually use the headings to change font size. Right? If we want to change font size, we can just go in and directly change font size. The headings are really designed to, organize the information on your page. So what are some other things we could do? Font family, all right? If you want to change the font that's showing up on your page. So let's go down to this paragraph tag here. I could go style equals. There's something called font family. And maybe I want to use a font courier. And maybe I also want this to be color. We'll make this one green. And maybe I want the font size of this one to be, we'll make this one even bigger, 100 point. Right? Now notice that these are all part of the same quotes. I have the attribute that I'm changing, a colon, and then the value that I'm changing it to, and then a semicolon marks the end. And then I have a new attribute that I'm changing, a colon, the value I'm changing it to, the semicolon marks the end. I have a new attribute, the colon, the value I'm changing it to, and then a semicolon marks the end. And again, if I go in here, all right, now I have, this is a different font style. It's a different color. And it's obviously way bigger. Now you might be asking yourself, all right, well, like what fonts do I have? There are preset fonts, but if you want any sort of crazy fonts, we're actually going to learn how to do that later in the semester. You have to link in the font file and then kind of create some stuff in your CSS sheet to set that all up. And that's something that we're going to learn how to do later. As far as kind of what's available right now, let's see, we could say, I'm going to search for W3 schools, and then I'm going to search for font family. And if I click on that, it'll show you some of the different font families that are available. So Times, Courier, Ariel, stuff like that. So you can use this site to kind of as like a reference to sort of figure out what's available to you. And then it'll give you link to other things like the font property, CSS font. Also on the left-hand side here, you're going to see these are all the different properties that I can change using this style attribute. So when I said that, I'm not going to memorize them all, it's because there's a lot of different properties that you can change inside of that style attribute. And we're going to learn how to use, a lot of these. We're not going to go over each one by one, but we're going to learn how to use some of the more common ones to do some of the basic formatting that we're going to want to do on our pages. All right. So that's sort of our starting introduction to HTML. I think this is probably a good place to sort of stop. But you kind of see, if we're kind of summarizing here, all right, HTML is built around these tags, and you can kind of think of the tag as a container. So you have a starting tag and an ending tag, and then this stuff that you put inside of it is called our inner HTML because it's inside the HTML tags. And this is the actual like content that you want to display. So the tags specify how you want to display it. And then inside of the tags is what you're actually displaying. All right. Now, when it comes to text, we have links, which is an A tag. We have the different headings to sort of organize our information. Those are the heading tags. We have paragraph tags for just regular text. Those tags can have attributes, and those attributes allow us to change different aspects. All right, we can change the font, we can change the color, we can change the size, we can bold it, we can italicize it, we can do all sorts of different things. And where we put the attribute is going to affect what it does. So when I put the body tag, that changed the color for the whole window, because again, the body tag is everything that shows up in the window. What else? We saw that there's different sections to the web page. So there's a head section and a body section. The head section is not stuff that actually shows up in the window, but it shows up in other places. So this is like the title tag, which showed up in our little browser tab. Again, up there, my first web page. But it doesn't actually show up in the window. Nowhere in this window does it say my first web page, which is why it doesn't go down inside of the body. And then last but not least, we learned that it's white space insensitive. So even if I hit enter a bunch of times, it's not going to change how it looks on my page. All right, my page is going to look exactly the same. All right, to get it to actually hit enter, I have to use the BR tag, and that's like hitting enter. All right, same thing with spacing. The first space counts. Any spaces after that do not count. If you want to have extra spaces after that, you do have to use the NBSP, and each one will give you a new space. Okay? So just things to keep in mind. And again, we're going to do this all in more detail. You're going to get some chances to practice all of this. This was really just sort of a first kind of introduction to HTML so you could get a feel for what we're going to be doing. All right, we're going to be learning about new tags that do different things. We're going to learn how to format those tags, and we're going to learn how to kind of put them all together to make a coherent and solid web page. All right, so I hope this was helpful. Let me know if you have any questions, and have a great day.